Hello, dear listener. I am grateful you are here with me today. Please subscribe so you can stay close for the next story and tell me in the comments which city or country you are listening from. It always touches my heart to see how far these moments reach. Enjoy the listen. In the soft shimmer of a Florida morning, a woman stood at the edge of her doorway holding a silence so deep it felt like the ocean itself was resting inside her chest. Her name was Taweaka Martin, and long before she ever dreamed of helping other women breathe again, long before she ever imagined healing circles or floating sanctuaries on open water, she was a young girl learning the language of fear in a place that should have felt safe. She grew up watching the shadows in her home move faster than the sunlight ever could, watching her mother hold her voice inside her body because speaking out was too dangerous and survival was a quiet practice learned day by day, heartbeat by heartbeat, bruise by bruise. And yet, even then, even when she could not understand why storms lived inside the walls she loved, she felt a seed of strength glowing somewhere in the deepest corner of her being. She could not name it, she could not describe it, but it was there holding on to her like a hand she could not see, whispering to her that one day the story would be different. Taweaka was a bright and hopeful girl, but life had already begun shaping her in ways she did not ask for. There were days she wondered why people who were supposed to protect you sometimes became the very reason you learned to hide your tears. She carried those questions through her teenage years, questions heavy enough to bend her, but somehow not heavy enough to break her, and yet pain found her again. A young man who spoke sweet words with bitter intentions, a relationship that started like a gentle breeze and turned into a storm so violent it left marks on her skin and deeper marks on her mind. She learned the silent fear of footsteps outside her door. She learned to sleep lightly. She learned to shrink herself to stay safe. But she also learned what her mother once taught her without speaking, that survival was not weakness, it was courage painted in invisible colors. There were moments when she thought the world was too dark for someone like her, moments when she believed she might disappear into the hurt, but then something shifted. She remembers the moment clearly. The air was still and warm. She was sitting alone thinking of all the women who had walked through pain like hers, women who stayed quiet, women who stayed afraid, women who believed escape would never come, and somewhere inside her something rose like a small flame refusing to die. She realized she had survived what was meant to silence her, and in that survival lived a purpose bigger than fear, bigger than her past, and bigger than her wounds. Her mother Annie Mae had carried her own battles through life, battles that carved strength into her bones and love into her heart. Taweaka looked at her mother one day, truly looked at her, and saw not a woman broken by life, but a woman forged by fire, and it changed everything. She wondered what would happen if other women could feel the same, if they could stand in the company of sisters who knew their pain, understood their silence, and still believed in their future. She wondered what healing might look like, if it felt safe, if it felt beautiful, if it felt like a world where no one had to hide anymore. But dreams are fragile at first, and hers was barely taking shape. She was still wounded, still unsure, still learning to breathe again. She did not know where to begin. She only knew she had to begin, and so she started by listening to the stories of women around her. Some she met in grocery store aisles, some she met at work, some she met by accident or fate, but no matter where the stories came from, they all carried a similar ache, different lives, same wounds, different faces, same fear, and each story lit a spark inside her until the spark became a fire, and the fire became a calling that would not let her rest. She created a small circle, at first a gathering of women who needed a place to cry without judgment, a place to speak without fear, a place to exist without being questioned, and she named her mission after the woman who gave her life, Annie Mae, a woman of courage whose love lived even in silence. The name carried history and hope, and every time she said it, she felt her mother's spirit stand beside her as if guiding the path forward. For years, Taweaka held these women close, offering them space, offering them grace, offering them warmth when the world had turned cold, and slowly her small circle began to grow. More women found her, more stories found her, more souls in need of healing gravitated toward her. Like branches reaching for light in the darkness, she was only one person, but somehow her presence felt like a shelter built from compassion and faith, and the women who came to her began to trust that maybe they were not meant to walk through life alone. Still, something was missing, something bigger, something bold enough to break the cycle of fear and isolation that survivors often carried with them. She wanted to create a world where healing was not just about escaping violence, but about rediscovering life. Rediscovering joy, rediscovering the very parts of oneself that trauma tried to steal, and one day, as she sat by the window, watching the summer sky stretch across the horizon, she felt the answer drift into her heart with the softness of a prayer. She would take these women away from everything, if only for a little while, away from their memories, away from their pain, away from the walls that remembered the hurt. She would take them somewhere open, somewhere bright, somewhere endless. She would take them to the ocean. At first the idea seemed impossible. Who would fund it? Who would join it? Who would believe in it? But Taweaka had already survived battles larger than this, and her spirit had learned the art of persistence. She began raising money one small step at a time, selling vouchers, organizing brunches, collecting donations, reaching out to strangers who believed in change. Her determination became the heartbeat of her mission, and people responded because they felt her sincerity, because they saw the fire in her eyes, because hope is contagious in the hands of someone who refuses to let it die. And then one morning, after months of work, the dream became real. A healing cruise, a floating sanctuary for survivors of domestic violence, a place where women could breathe again, surrounded by endless water and endless sky, a place where their trauma could loosen its grip. For a few precious days, she imagined women painting together, laughing together, praying together, sharing pieces of their stories. Beneath the soft hum of the ship, she imagined them feeling the salt air on their skin, as if the ocean itself was cleansing the hurt, washing away the memories that kept them trapped, and letting them rise again, lighter, freer, bolder. The first year only a few women joined, but it was enough, more than enough, because what happened on that ship was something sacred. Women who had forgotten the sound of their own voice began speaking. Women who had forgotten the strength in their own hands began reaching. Women who had forgotten the warmth of companionship felt their hearts wake up again, and Taweaka watched it all with quiet awe, knowing that the impossible had become possible simply because she believed it could. The world outside did not always understand her mission. Some people thought healing should be quiet, confined, clinical, but Taweaka knew better. Healing was movement, healing was connection, healing was the sound of waves crashing against the side of a ship as a woman whispered her story for the first time. Healing was the kind of freedom that could only happen when trauma was held in gentle hands and released into the wide open world where it could no longer cage the soul. And so Taweaka began to dream bigger, but dreams take time and vision takes courage, and though she had both, she still had a long path ahead. She looked at the lives around her and saw how quickly shelters filled, how quickly survivors were left with nowhere to go after the crisis was over, how the world offered escape, but not always rebuilding, and she vowed that she would change that too. One day she would create a home, a real home, a safe haven for women transitioning out of violence, a place where they could rest, where they could rebuild, where they could feel human again, not rushed, not judged, not forgotten, but cherished. The idea of creating a home for women who had survived the darkest corners of life lived inside Taweaka like a silent vow. She carried it in her mornings, she carried it in her evenings, she carried it through every conversation with survivors who whispered that they had nowhere to go after escaping the abuse, nowhere to sleep, nowhere to gather their strength, nowhere to rebuild the pieces of their identities shattered by years of fear. And she understood more deeply than anyone how a woman can walk out of violence brave, but broken, ready to restart, but with empty hands and trembling hope. She saw the gaps in the systems, she saw the loneliness survivors carried, and she knew that a temporary shelter could save a life, but a safe home could give it back. But before she could build that dream, she had to continue building herself. She had spent years healing from her own scars, and yet healing is never a straight line. Sometimes it is gentle, sometimes it is harsh, sometimes it is quiet, and sometimes it roars inside the heart, demanding to be felt and understood. She had nights when memories came back in fragments, nights when shadows on the wall felt too familiar, nights when she questioned whether she was strong enough to carry so many stories on her shoulders. But every morning she would rise again, holding her purpose like a lantern inside her chest, reminding herself that her pain had shaped her, but it would not limit her. Her past had wounded her, but it would not define her. She believed this with every breath she took. More women began joining the healing circles, more stories arrived carried by trembling voices and tired eyes. Some came from different states, some came from different cultures, but pain spoke the same language, and so did survival. Every woman who walked into Taweaka's space carried a past that weighed heavily on her skin, but they also carried a spark, a tiny flicker of the life they still wanted to live, and Taweaka made it her mission to protect that spark, to nurture it until it grew into something powerful enough to change the course of their future. Her home became a place of soft blankets and warm conversations, a place where tears were welcomed and laughter was not questioned, a place where silence was allowed when words felt too heavy, and where stories flowed freely when hearts felt strong enough to open. She created small rituals for comfort, lighting a candle for those who wanted prayer, offering journals for those who preferred writing, playing soft music for those who felt healing through sound. Every detail mattered, because every woman mattered, and Taweaka refused to let any of them feel alone even for a moment. But as her community grew, so did the challenges. Sometimes there was not enough money to support retreats, sometimes there were too many women seeking help with not enough resources to go around, sometimes the weight of their pain blended with her own, and she felt like she was running out of space inside herself to carry everything she heard. But she never stopped, she never turned away, she never let exhaustion silence her compassion. She kept moving, because every time she looked into the eyes of a survivor, she saw a version of herself she once was, and she remembered how desperately that younger version needed someone who would not give up on her. When the second healing cruise came to life, it was larger, brighter, fuller than the first. More women filled the cabins, more stories filled the hallways, more healing flowed across the deck like sunlight, finding hidden corners of their souls. Taweaka watched them stepping onto the ship. One by one, some timid, some hopeful, some trembling, as if unsure whether they deserved such a moment of peace. But as the ship pulled away from the shore, something magical happened. The ocean opened itself to them, and the world they had known, the world that hurt them, the world that betrayed them, began to fade in the distance, leaving behind only water and sky and the possibility of new beginnings. On that cruise, there were sessions where women painted the emotions they could not speak, creating colors from memories that once bruised their bodies. There were fitness gatherings where they moved their muscles with newfound strength, reminding themselves that their bodies belonged to them. Again, there were prayer circles where voices that had once been silenced rose together in soft harmony, and Taweaka felt the air shift around them, as if the universe itself was listening, honoring every wound, acknowledging every victory. One evening, Taweaka stood on the deck, watching the sunset melt into the horizon, the sky turning into shades of coral and honey mixed with soft breaths of lavender, and for a moment she closed her eyes, letting the wind brush against her face. She felt the weight of her past, she felt the weight of the stories she carried, she felt the weight of expectations and responsibility, but beneath all of that she also felt a quiet peace in knowing that she was exactly where she needed to be. She opened her eyes again and saw the women behind her laughing softly, sharing gentle moments, leaning on each other like the sisters life never gave them, and her heart swelled with gratitude, the kind that fills your chest so completely it feels like a warm tide rising from within. After the cruise ended, women returned home different, lighter, stronger, more awake to the possibilities of their own future. Some wrote to her to say they had finally found the courage to start a new job. Some said they enrolled in therapy. Others said they had started journaling daily, or had begun praying again, or had finally told someone the truth about their past. And Taweaka kept every message, every note, every story, like a prayer folded inside her heart. She carried each transformation as a reminder that her work mattered, that her purpose was real, that healing was not only possible but contagious. Still, she knew something was missing. She could help women escape, she could help them heal, she could help them rebuild their spirit, but she wanted to give them something even deeper, something long-lasting, something that would stand the test of time. She wanted to build a transitional home, a place where survivors could live safely while they rebuilt every piece of their life, from employment to self-esteem, from parenting to education, from emotional support to real independence. She had seen too many women return to their abusers simply because they had nowhere else to go, and that thought broke her heart every time she heard it. She knew the world needed a place where survival could turn into stability, where brokenness could turn into rebirth, where fear could transform into confidence. She started working tirelessly on the vision. She spoke to community leaders, she attended events, she presented her project with hope shining through her voice. She wrote proposals, she searched for land, she sought donations, she prayed for answers. She believed that God would guide her even when the path felt impossibly long. She had no money to build it, no connections to make it easy, no blueprint to follow, but she had faith and determination and a fire inside her that refused to dim. There were days she doubted herself, days she felt overwhelmed by the size of the dream, days when she wondered whether people truly understood the depth of what she was trying to create. But every time she met a survivor who said, "I have nowhere to go," every time she listened To a woman say, "I want to rebuild, but I don't know how," she felt her purpose tighten around her ribs, reminding her that she was doing what she was born to do. And then something unexpected began to happen. Small donations started coming in. People she had never met sent messages saying they believed in her mission. Local churches offered support. Community women volunteered to help others, donated clothes and supplies, and with each contribution, she felt her dream take another breath, another heartbeat, another step toward reality. She realized she was not alone. She realized the world was full of people who wanted to help. They just needed someone brave enough to start. Her evenings were spent drawing out plans, imagining the rooms, imagining a communal kitchen, imagining beds lined with soft blankets, imagining a garden where women could sit under the sun and feel alive again. She pictured walls that felt safe, halls that echoed laughter. Instead of fear, rooms where women could look in the mirror and see possibility instead of loss. She imagined everything down to the smallest detail, because she knew healing lived in the details, love lived in the details, hope lived in the details. One night she looked at her reflection, knowing she had come a long way from the girl who learned to survive in silence. She touched the scars she still carried and whispered a thank you to the past that tried to break her, because without it she would not have become the woman who now stood before the mirror. A woman determined to change the story for others, a woman who had turned her pain into purpose, a woman who carried courage like a second heartbeat. The dream of the transitional home grew inside Taweaka with a rhythm almost like breathing, steady, constant, unshakable, even on the days when exhaustion made her body heavy and her voice tired, even on the nights when she wondered how one woman could carry the needs of so many. But she reminded herself that she was not just one woman, she was the sum of every version of herself she had ever fought to become, the girl who learned to survive, the woman who learned to heal, the leader who learned to rise, the survivor who learned to transform pain into purpose. She held all of them inside her, and together they pushed her forward step by step, heartbeat by heartbeat, prayer by prayer. Her mission reached more people than she expected, sometimes through word of mouth, sometimes through a stranger sharing her story online, sometimes through women who had healed under her care, now becoming ambassadors of hope themselves. She watched them speak boldly about survival. They no longer whispered about what they went through. They no longer hid in shame. They stood firmly rooted in their new identity, telling the world that healing was possible, telling other women that they were not alone. And Taweaka felt pride swell in her chest every time she saw that transformation, because it meant the cycle was breaking, not just for one life, but for many. Still, there were days when everything felt too slow, days when every meeting ended with promises, but not enough action, days when financial doors remained closed, days when she felt invisible despite her efforts. She tried to stay strong, but there were moments when she collapsed into the quiet of her room, curling into herself and letting the fear spill out in tears. She wondered if she was dreaming too big, if maybe she was not meant to build something so large, so heavy, so sacred. But then she remembered the sisters who slept on couches or in shelters or in their cars after escaping violence. She remembered the messages from women who said they would return to their abusers if they had no safe place to go, and every doubt inside her turned into determination. She kept speaking, she kept showing up, she kept praying harder, she kept believing deeper, and sometimes that was all she had to offer, faith and persistence, but she gave them with everything inside her. During this stage of her journey, she noticed how the universe sent people at the exact moments she needed them the most, like the woman who approached her after a community talk, tears in her eyes, saying she wished a home like this existed when she escaped years ago, and then placed a donation in Taweaka's hands before she could even ask, or the church leader who offered their space for gatherings, or the therapist who volunteered hours to help survivors with emotional rebuilding, or the fitness coach who wanted to teach classes every Saturday simply because he believed women deserved to feel strong and capable again. Every offering felt like a piece of the home coming together, not in brick, not in wood, but in intention, in love and community. The foundation was already forming even before a building existed. She realized that the home began in the people who believed in the mission. It began in kindness, it began in compassion, and by the time the structure was built, it would already stand on the strongest ground imaginable. Through this time, Taweaka began receiving invitations to speak at events. She shared her story with rooms full of strangers, telling them how survival shaped her, how faith carried her, how healing created purpose, and how one dream could change thousands of lives. She did not speak Like a professional, she spoke like a woman who had lived through fire and learned to rise without bitterness. Her authenticity moved people more than any rehearsed speech could. She watched audiences lean in, eyes softening, shoulders lowering as they absorbed her truth, and many came to her afterward, saying they felt seen for the first time in years. But there was one moment that shifted something profound within her. It happened at a small gathering when a frail older woman approached her with trembling hands, saying, "I thought healing was only for the young, but you reminded me that it is never too late to reclaim my life." Taweaka held her hands, gently feeling the weight of those words, and she realized then that her work was not only for the present generation, but for every woman who had lived too long in silence. Her mission was universal, timeless, reaching women who were 20 or women who were 70, because pain did not discriminate, and neither would healing. As her following grew, she began creating more workshops, more circles, more safe spaces, sometimes traveling across states just to meet women who needed her presence, even if only for a short moment. She spent hours listening to their stories and offering them guidance, offering them comfort, offering them the same understanding she once begged the world to give her. She saw them leave her workshops with softened shoulders and steadier breaths, and those small shifts mattered to her just as much as the grand ones, because healing happened in layers, and she honored each layer gently. Her connection to the women became so deep that she carried their stories everywhere she went, sometimes waking in the middle of the night remembering a voice or a tear or a confession. She wished she could erase their pain, but instead she used it as fuel to push harder, because every story was a reminder of why her dream could not wait. During one particularly difficult season, money was tight, resources were low, and her spirit felt stretched. She questioned whether she had the strength to keep fighting. She wondered if she was failing before she even began. But one evening, as she sat alone looking over her plans, a soft knock came at her door. It was a young woman, one she had supported months earlier, holding a small envelope in her hand. She said, "I got my first paycheck since leaving my abuser, and I want the first thing I ever give to be for your home, because you gave me my life back." Taweaka opened the envelope after she left and saw a small amount, nothing extravagant, but she cried holding it, because it was not the number that mattered, it was the meaning, the sacrifice, the gratitude, the love behind it. She knew then that she could not give up. She wiped her tears, straightened her plans, and reminded herself that every step mattered, even the small ones, especially the small ones. The next months became a blend of progress and purpose, of long hours and late nights, of paperwork and community meetings, of hope intertwining with exhaustion. But she moved forward steadily until her dream began to take shape in ways she could finally see. Volunteers started cleaning, potential landowners discussed possibilities, architects offered sketches, and the first draft of the transitional home became real enough for her to hold in her hands. When she looked at the sketch, she imagined the footsteps of women walking those halls. She imagined children laughing in the garden. She imagined late-night conversations in the common room. She imagined healing vibrating through the walls like soft music, and tears filled her eyes again, but this time they were tears of anticipation, not fear. She saw a future where women would arrive with trembling voices and leave with unshakable confidence. She saw a future where no woman would choose danger simply because safety was too far to reach. She saw a future where generations would be changed because their mothers found a place that saved them, and she felt grateful to be chosen for this mission, even though it had cost her so much, even though it had demanded parts of her she did not know she could give. She knew the purpose was bigger than her, and she accepted that with humility. One morning, she stood outside looking at the grounds where the home might one day rise. She closed her eyes, letting the wind brush across her skin. She whispered a promise to the women she had helped and the women she had yet to meet. She promised to keep going. She promised to fight for them. She promised to build a place where love lived, where hope breathed, where healing became a way of life, not just a moment. And as she whispered that promise, she felt something deep within her settle like a stone, finding its place, as if the universe itself had heard her vow and sealed it with quiet assurance. The months that followed carried a different kind of energy, as if the air around Taweaka was shifting, preparing itself for something greater. Every conversation felt meaningful, every encounter felt purposeful, every sunrise seemed to whisper that she was getting closer, even if she could not yet see the finish line clearly. She moved through each day with a steady rhythm, balancing her responsibilities, her emotions, her dreams, her reality, and the countless lives intertwined with her mission. As she traveled from city to city speaking on panels, visiting shelters, connecting with survivors, and meeting families, she noticed how people responded to her story not with pity, but with admiration, and hope. They saw her not as a victim, but as a force, a path builder, a woman who refused to allow her pain to end with her. Instead, she transformed it into something others could walk through safely if they ever found themselves lost and afraid. She did not speak to impress, she spoke to heal, and healing was something people recognized immediately. It felt familiar, it felt human, it felt necessary. At one gathering, a man approached her after her speech, his voice trembling as he explained how he had watched his own mother survive years of abuse, how he felt helpless as a child, how he now wished he could help women who reminded him of her. He asked if he could join her mission, and she said yes, knowing that survivors were not only women, but the children who witnessed the destruction of love, the families who learned silence, the generations who carried wounds they could not name, and people like him wanted to help because they understood the depth of the suffering. The more Taweaka traveled, the more she realized that her purpose was bigger than any building she could construct. It was a movement, a shift in the way society viewed domestic violence survivors. It was a commitment to speak the truth openly, to break the chains of shame, to teach the world that these women were not broken, they were powerful warriors who had endured what most people could never imagine and still found the strength to stand again. But even with these moments of connection, she often returned home emotionally drained. Loneliness wrapped around her at night like a cold blanket. She missed having someone to lean on, someone to share the weight with, someone who understood the heaviness of carrying so many burdens. She would sit in the quiet of her living room, sometimes with only the sound of the refrigerator humming in the background, and she would wonder if she would ever find someone who loved her, not despite her past, but because of the strength it had forged inside her. There were days when she felt like falling apart, and she did behind closed doors with her head bowed and her heart trembling. She cried into her hands, whispering that she just needed a moment to rest. But even in those fragile moments, she reminded herself that rest was not the same as giving up. Her softness was not a weakness, her tears were not a failure, her vulnerability was not a flaw. She allowed herself to feel everything fully because she knew suppressing her emotions would only harden her. And she needed her heart soft to do this work. One afternoon, she received a call from a young mother she had helped months before. Her voice sounded steadier, brighter, lighter. She said she had found a job, she had found a home, she had found peace, and she wanted Taweaka to know that she prayed for her every day so that she could keep helping women like her. That message lifted Taweaka's spirit in ways she could not explain. It reminded her that she was not pouring into an empty well, she was planting seeds, and those seeds were growing even when she was not watching. Around this time, Taweaka's work caught the attention of a major organization known for supporting community initiatives. They invited her to speak at a national event, an opportunity that could change the entire course of her mission. She accepted, though her hands shook. As she typed the reply, she felt honored, but she also felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. People were watching, people were believing in her, people expected her to lead with strength and truth, and she was determined not to let them down. When the day of the event arrived, she walked onto the stage wearing a soft, calm expression, but inside, she felt waves of emotion rising like a tide. She breathed deeply, grounding herself. Before beginning to speak, she told her story from the beginning, not to evoke sympathy, but to show the arc of transformation. She spoke of darkness and its cruelty, but she also illuminated the power of resilience, the beauty of faith, the miracle of second chances. Her words floated across the room like warm light, enveloping every listener, and by the time she finished, the entire audience rose to their feet, applauding not just her story, but every woman she represented. After the event, a representative from the organization approached her, saying they believed in her mission and wanted to help bring the Transitional home to life, not as a small project, but as a fully supported vision with resources, guidance, connections, and long-term investment. Taweaka felt her knees weaken, tears filling her eyes. She had prayed for this moment, begged for it, fought toward it, and now the universe had aligned everything in a single breath. She felt overwhelmed, humbled, and deeply grateful, but she also felt a fierce determination ignite within her, because now she knew the dream was no longer a dream, it was becoming a reality. In the following months, she worked closely with advisors, architects, community leaders, and survivors. The blueprint of the home evolved beautifully, each room designed with care, each space created with purpose. The common room would have warm lighting, soft furniture, and walls Filled with affirmations, the bedrooms would offer privacy, peace, and comfort. The outdoor area would include a small garden, a healing space where women could breathe fresh air, reconnect with themselves, and feel the earth beneath their feet, reminding them they were alive and capable of growing again. As she shaped the home, she realized it was shaping her too. It softened the wounds she had carried for years. It gave meaning to the pain that once felt senseless. It helped her forgive herself for the moments she thought she was weak. It helped her rewrite the story of her life. From survivor to leader, from wounded to warrior, from hiding to walking boldly into the world. During this time, she also rediscovered parts of herself she had forgotten. She allowed herself to laugh more freely, to rest more intentionally, to dream beyond her mission. She even let herself imagine love again, the kind of love that was gentle, stable, and genuine, the kind she had never truly known. She wondered if it could find her one day, if she could share her life with someone who understood her spirit, someone who valued her strength, someone who appreciated her journey. But she did not rush it. She trusted that if love was meant for her, it would arrive naturally in the right moment. As construction began on the transitional home, she visited the site regularly, watching the workers lay the foundation, raise the beams, shape the rooms. She walked through the open frame, imagining the women who would soon walk those halls, imagining the sound of healing conversations, laughter, tears, breakthroughs. She imagined mothers tucking their children into bed without fear for the first time in years. She imagined teenage girls finally sleeping peacefully. She imagined women waking each morning with new hope. She felt the presence of every survivor who had crossed her path, as if they were walking beside her, whispering gratitude and strength. The day the walls began to stand, she felt something profound inside her shift, like a chapter closing and a new one opening, because the pain that once defined her had transformed into a sanctuary that would protect countless lives. After her pain had not been wasted, it had been repurposed into something holy. One evening, she stood alone inside the half-built home, the sun setting behind her, casting long golden light across the space. The unfinished walls glowed softly, and she felt tears gather again. But these tears were warm, not sharp. They were filled with awe, not sorrow. She whispered to the empty rooms, saying that she built this place for every woman who thought she was alone, for every woman who thought she was unworthy, for every woman who thought she would never rise again. She promised that no one who entered these doors would ever walk through their healing journey in the dark. She promised that love would fill these walls just as strongly as strength would. She promised that this home would become a lighthouse in the storm. The months continued to unfold like soft turning pages, and every day Taweaka watched the transitional home rise a little higher into the sky, each beam, each wall, each window carrying the weight of lives that would one day heal. Inside its embrace, she felt a deep sense of reverence. Every time she stepped onto the grounds, as if she were walking on sacred earth, the soil felt warm beneath her feet, the air felt protective, even the silence around the unfinished building seemed to hum with purpose. She visited the site almost daily, sometimes bringing hot meals for the workers, sometimes walking through the growing structure with her hands brushing gently along the wooden frames, as if greeting the home like an old friend, sometimes standing in the very center and closing her eyes, imagining the sound of life breathing through the walls. She pictured women sharing stories in the kitchen, laughter echoing through the hallways, children running freely across the yard, mothers waking each morning without fear, replacing every past nightmare with new hope. And she felt her heart swell each time the vision came alive in her mind. But even as the home grew, she faced challenges, external ones, internal ones, emotional ones, the kind that tested every layer of her strength. Funding needed renewing, deadlines needed adjusting, unexpected roadblocks slowed the progress, and sometimes she lay awake at night, her mind racing through every possible fear. What if something went wrong? What if the support stopped? What if she failed the women who were counting on her? She held these worries tightly beneath her ribs, but she refused to let them stop her, because she knew she was not building this alone. Faith was building with her community, was building with her purpose, was building with her. During this time, she continued to connect with women seeking guidance, each story a reminder of why she fought so fiercely. A woman with 2 toddlers who had fled in the middle of the night, a teenager who had nowhere to go after escaping a violent home, a grandmother who had been silent for decades until she found the courage to speak through tears. Each one carried a world of pain, and each one found something in Taweaka, whether it was hope or understanding or simply the comfort of being seen and She carried them all in her heart as she pushed forward, determined never to let their pain go unanswered. One evening, after a long, exhausting day, she received a message from a survivor she had supported months earlier. The woman wrote, "Simply, I am alive because you believed in me." Taweaka sat still for a moment, letting the words sink into her soul. She read them again and again until tears blurred the screen. She needed that message more than she realized on that particular day when her spirit felt stretched thin, when doubts had whispered too loudly. That message reached her like a gentle hand steadying her, reminding her why she could not stop. As the home grew closer to completion, she began planning the programs that would help rebuild lives. She envisioned counseling rooms filled with healing conversations. She imagined career classes where women could learn skills, financial workshops empowering them to regain independence, early morning fitness sessions reminding them that strength lived inside their bodies as well as their hearts. She pictured evening circles where survivors shared victories, big and small, celebrating each other's journeys and lifting each other through the harder days. She wanted this home to be more than a shelter. She wanted it to be a rebirth. She also dreamed of creating a room dedicated to quiet reflection, a space where women could sit with their thoughts, breathe deeply, release sorrow, reconnect with themselves, a sanctuary inside a sanctuary, a place where even the air felt soft, where peace wrapped itself around every visitor. She imagined warm lighting walls in gentle earth tones, a single plant in the corner, a soft rug beneath their feet. She believed healing needed silence as much as it needed support, and she wanted both woven into the heart of the home. As she worked, she realized her own healing was evolving too. She no longer felt like the woman who once believed she had nothing left. She felt stronger, more rooted, more certain of herself. Her faith deepened, her compassion expanded, her voice grew steadier. She still had moments of fear, moments of vulnerability, moments where memories rose unexpectedly, but they no longer controlled her. They no longer defined her. They simply existed as pieces of the journey that shaped who she had become. One afternoon, she received a call from the organization supporting her. They wanted her to attend a major conference where donors, leaders, survivors, and advocates would gather. They believed sharing her progress could inspire even more support and potentially expand her mission beyond the home into future programs, opportunities, and partnerships. The idea terrified her, but she accepted, knowing that growth often lived on the other side of fear. When she stepped onto the conference stage weeks later, she felt a hush fall over the room. She spoke slowly, gently from her heart. She spoke about survival and dignity, about the courage it took for a woman to walk away, about the weight of healing, about the power of community, about the necessity of safe spaces. She spoke not as someone above the women she served, but as someone who walked with them through the same darkness and rose with them into the same light. She shared her vision for the transitional home, and the audience listened with quiet reverence, as if they could feel the soul of the project pulsing through her words. When she finished, the applause felt like a wave washing over her. She breathed deeply, overwhelmed by the emotion in the room. Several people approached her afterward, offering support, wanting to be part of her mission. One woman embraced her tightly, whispering, "You are doing God's work." Another placed tearful hands over her own, saying, "I wish something like this existed when I needed it." And a man with a soft voice told her that her story reminded him of his sister, who never made it out. He said he wanted to help so that others could live the life she never had. Each moment touched her deeply, imprinting itself into her heart. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months, and finally, after so much prayer, effort, love, and sacrifice, the home reached its final stages. The walls painted with warm colors, the rooms furnished with care, the garden planted with fresh soil, the kitchen stocked with essentials, the lights glowing softly as if welcoming the future residents. Already the first soft breeze through the hallway made her chest tighten with emotion. She walked slowly through each room, letting the atmosphere settle inside her. The home felt alive, as if it had been waiting for the women who would soon fill it with laughter, tears, strength, and new beginnings. She stood in the common room, her fingers brushing across the back of a sofa. She exhaled slowly, feeling years of pain and resilience merging into this single moment. She said softly, almost to herself, "We made it." She felt the presence of every woman she helped, and every woman she would help. She felt the weight of the past fall away like leaves drifting from a tree, making space for new life. She walked through the halls, whispering blessings, whispering promises, whispering gratitude. She imagined the Footsteps that would walk these floors, each one fragile at first, but growing stronger with time. She imagined the conversations, the breakthroughs, the healing that would take form inside these walls. Then came the day when the home officially opened. She watched the first women step through the door, their eyes filled with a blend of fear, hesitation, and hope. They clutched their bags tightly, their breaths uneven, but when they saw the warmth inside, the softness of the space, the safety woven into every corner, their shoulders eased slightly. One whispered, "This feels like the first safe place I have ever been." Taweaka felt tears rise, but she held them gently, honoring the sacredness of the moment. As the days passed, the home filled with gentle rhythms, women cooking together, sharing memories, laughing cautiously, healing slowly. She watched them rediscover themselves piece by piece. She saw confidence return, voices strengthen, smiles appear. She saw connections forming, community growing, trust blossoming. She witnessed the beauty of rebirth, not rushed, not forced, but unfolding naturally at its own pace, like flowers opening in the morning light. Taweaka often stood quietly in the doorway of the common room, watching the women without them noticing, her heart swelling every time she saw them living without fear. She knew then that every struggle, every tear, every fight, every sleepless night had been worth it, because now these women had a place to breathe, a place to rebuild, a place to rise. The weeks that followed settled into a gentle rhythm inside the home, as if the walls themselves understood the delicate nature of healing, the way it rose slowly, the way it needed softness and patience, the way it unfolded differently for each woman. Some healed through silence, some through tears, some through laughter that returned like a shy guest knocking at the door of their spirit. Taweaka moved through these days with quiet intention, offering support without crowding, offering presence without pressure, offering guidance without force. She understood that rebuilding a life required space-time, trust, and the safety to fall apart and begin again. Every morning she walked the halls, breathing in the peaceful atmosphere, the soft hum of conversation from the kitchen, the distant sound of children playing, the steady steps of women preparing for their new routines. She cherished these simple sounds because they were proof that life was returning to places once filled with fear. They were evidence that healing was no longer a dream, but a reality unfolding gently right before her eyes. One morning, she found a woman named Liana sitting alone near the garden, her hands trembling slightly, her gaze fixed on the soil. Taweaka sat beside her quietly waiting. Liana whispered that she had not slept well because memories had risen like shadows in the night. Taweaka listened with an open heart, holding space for every word, and when Liana finished, she said softly, "You survived those nights. Already now you are learning to survive the memory of them too. Healing takes courage, and you have already stepped into courage by being here." Liana wiped her eyes, slowly breathing in the reassurance, and for the first time in days her shoulders softened just a little. Taweaka learned that healing often came in moments like these, small tender exchanges where fear loosened its grip and hope slipped quietly into its place. Sometimes the breakthrough was not a loud, victorious moment, but a silent breath of relief, a single tear that fell without resistance, a shaky smile making its way back after months of hiding. She celebrated each of these victories because they were sacred, they were real, they were life coming back into bodies that had forgotten what safety felt like. As more women settled into the home, Taweaka organized workshops and activities that strengthened their spirits. She invited counselors who specialized in trauma awareness. She invited teachers who offered financial literacy classes. She invited coaches who led self-defense and fitness sessions. She invited artists who taught the women how to express their emotions through color and movement. She watched the women engage hesitantly at first, then slowly with more openness, as they discovered parts of themselves they thought were lost forever. One evening during a group session, a woman shared that she had forgotten the sound of her own laughter until she heard it unexpectedly during an art class. She said it felt strange at first, as if the sound came from someone else, but then she realized it was hers, and she cried because she had not known how much she missed herself. Taweaka listened with tears gathering in her own eyes, because she understood that reclaiming joy was one of the most powerful forms of healing. It meant that the soul was waking up after being quiet for far too long. There were days when the home felt like a soft blanket wrapping around every wounded heart, days filled with progress, smiles, breakthroughs. But there were also days when the weight of the past returned for some women, causing them to retreat into silence, to withdraw, to question their worth. She watched these shifts carefully, never judging, always gently guiding them back to themselves. She reminded them that healing was not a straight path, it was a spiral sometimes, leading them backward so they could learn something new about themselves before moving forward again. She reminded them that progress was still progress, even when it felt slow. In quiet moments, she reflected on her own journey, how she too had once sat in silence, unsure if life could ever feel safe again, how she had once believed her story was broken beyond repair, but now she stood inside a home built from the very pain that tried to destroy her. She saw her past not as a wound, but as a teacher guiding her toward purpose. She realized that every scar she carried had transformed into a roadmap for other women, and she felt grateful for the strength that had grown from her suffering. One day, a young girl living in the home approached her holding a small drawing. The child explained that it was a picture of a big house filled with light and happy faces, and she said, "This is a safe place because you made it so." Taweaka looked at the drawing, her chest tightening with emotion. She knelt down, thanking the little girl gently and hugged her softly. That small piece of paper felt like a treasure, more precious than any award or recognition, because it was drawn from pure truth. As the home continued to thrive, Taweaka began receiving messages from people across the country, women seeking help, families asking for guidance, volunteers wanting to contribute, supporters expressing admiration. She felt humbled by the growing ripple of impact. But she also felt the responsibility of holding so many stories, so many lives. She prayed nightly for strength, wisdom, and clarity, asking for guidance to continue leading with love rather than exhaustion. She promised herself that she would never allow her spirit to burn out, because the women needed her strong, present, and authentic. One afternoon, she attended a community meeting where she shared updates about the home and future plans. She felt proud as she spoke, not of her own accomplishments, but of the transformations happening within the walls, the stories of courage, the stories of second chances, the stories of healing. She watched the room soften as she described the women's progress, and several community members offered support, wanting to extend the impact of the home beyond its walls into schools, hospitals, neighborhoods, and workplaces. She knew then that the mission was expanding in a direction aligned with her deepest hopes. During this time, Taweaka also began to feel a shift within her. She felt herself opening again to the possibility of connection, friendship, companionship. She had spent so long focused on surviving, then building, that she had never allowed herself to imagine a world where she could experience love again. But as she grew stronger, as her pain softened into wisdom, she felt pieces of herself reconnect. She began to dream of a future that held not only purpose, but also joy, and maybe one day a gentle partner who could walk beside her without dimming her light. She did not rush these feelings, she simply acknowledged them with quiet acceptance. One evening after a long day, she stood outside the home, watching the sky turn shades of orange and pink, the soft wind brushing against her face. She felt peace settle inside her, a peace she had not known in years. She realized that although her journey had been heavy and painful, it had brought her to a place of profound meaning. She understood that the darkness she once feared had become the soil in which her purpose grew. She stood in gratitude for every version of herself that had survived, for every step that led her here, for every woman who had trusted her with their story. The women inside the home continued to flourish. Some found jobs, some reunited safely with family, some enrolled in school, some found new passions, some discovered self-worth for the first time. She watched them walk with confidence, watched them laugh without fear, watched them hold themselves differently, shoulders lifted, hearts open, eyes bright. She realized that these women were not just healing, they were transforming into leaders, mothers, friends, and role models who would change their own families and communities for generations to come. One night, as the home settled into silence, she walked slowly through the halls, listening to the peaceful quiet. She entered the reflection room, sitting on the soft rug, letting her breath steady. She whispered, "Thank you," not directed at anyone specific, but to life itself. She thanked the path that shaped her, the pain that taught her, the strength that carried her, the purpose that found her. She thanked every woman whose journey added meaning to her own, and she thanked the universe for trusting her with such sacred work. The transitional home had become more than a structure. It was a living, breathing sanctuary infused with the love, the courage, and the resilience of every woman who had walked through its doors. Taweaka walked the halls, often imagining all the invisible threads connecting Stories of survival, strength, hope, and rebirth, each thread vibrating softly as if the house itself remembered every tear, every whispered word, every tentative smile that had ever filled its rooms. She felt profoundly humbled to witness the way life was gently restoring itself inside these walls. She often paused in the common room, observing women sharing their journeys, laughing together, celebrating milestones small and large. She saw the subtle transformations. The woman who once flinched when touched now held hands confidently. The mother who feared her own voice now read stories to her children aloud. The teenager who had not spoken for months now shared her art with others. All of it felt miraculous, not because it was sudden, but because it was real, it was slow, it was authentic, and it was unfolding in its own time. Taweaka began planning the next stage of her vision, expanding the mission to reach even more survivors across the country. She worked tirelessly to create programs in education, job training, mental health support, advocacy, and community reintegration. She partnered with organizations that shared her philosophy that healing was holistic, not isolated. She envisioned a network of support spanning cities and states where survivors could move from crisis to stability to empowerment without ever feeling abandoned. She knew that by empowering women, she was transforming families, communities, and generations. Even as the mission grew, she never lost sight of the intimacy and personal connection that defined her approach. She spent hours with women individually, listening to their fears, offering guidance, sharing silence, holding space. She believed that the smallest acts of attention sometimes mattered more than grand gestures. The gentle touch on a shoulder, the patient listening, the acknowledgement of unseen struggle, these were the moments that made the greatest impact. One morning, a young woman approached her holding a letter in her trembling hands. She said, "This is the first thing I have written in months, and I wanted you to read it." Taweaka took the paper, gently unfolding it. She read words full of hope and self-discovery, words about strength, rediscovery, joy, and new beginnings. She felt tears rise once again because she understood that healing did not erase the past, but it transformed it. It reshaped pain into purpose, despair into courage, and hopelessness into vision. The women of the home began mentoring each other, older survivors guiding newcomers, new mothers teaching teens, recovering adults supporting children, and Taweaka watched the cycle of empowerment blossom. It was a living proof of what could happen when someone believed in you, and someone created a safe space when love and patience replaced judgment and fear. The home was no longer only a place, it had become a movement. It had become a heartbeat echoing far beyond its walls. As the first anniversary of the home approached, Taweaka planned a celebration. She invited all the women who had been part of the journey from the earliest days, some who had come seeking refuge, some who had attended the healing cruises, some who had joined workshops or mentorship programs. They gathered together, sharing stories, laughing, crying, singing, offering prayers of gratitude and blessings. She looked around the room at the faces transformed by courage and resilience, and her heart swelled with emotion so deep it felt like it might burst. She reflected on her own journey, the girl who once hid in silence, the young woman who escaped abuse, the survivor who rebuilt herself, the leader who became a light for others. She remembered the nights of doubt, fear, exhaustion, and grief, and she realized that every step, every tear, every small act of persistence had led to this moment. She whispered quietly to herself, "Thank you to every version of me that survived, every version of her mother that had silently guided her, every woman who had trusted her, every stranger who had believed in her." She felt connected to the universe in a way that was sacred and unshakable. The home had become a place where women not only survived, but thrived, where broken hearts and battered spirits found the courage to hope again, where generations of families would see the possibility of life lived fully and freely. She understood that the walls would continue to hold stories long after she was gone, and she felt comforted knowing that the seed she planted would grow into a forest of hope and healing. Even in moments of solitude, she felt the presence of all the women who had crossed her path, their gratitude and courage filling her heart. She walked the halls, sometimes alone, but never lonely. She touched the furniture softly, the curtains, the windows, imagining the laughter, the tears, the conversations, the quiet breakthroughs, each one a testament to what was possible when love and faith collided. She realized that the home had not only given women a place to heal, it had given her a life filled with purpose and a soul steeped in gratitude. Taweaka began envisioning the future beyond the home. She imagined educational scholarships for survivors, children programs for empowerment, vocational training, mental health advocacy, national networks. She wanted to ensure that no woman ever felt trapped or invisible. She wanted to create a legacy of hope that transcended geography, circumstance, and limitation. She knew that the work would never truly end, but she also knew that each life transformed created a ripple that reached far beyond what she could see. She continued her speaking engagements, sharing the story of the home, the vision of healing, and the power of transformation. She inspired audiences with her authenticity. She did not sugarcoat the hardships. She did not pretend the journey was easy. She spoke of fear, sorrow, doubt, resilience, hope, faith, and love. She reminded the world that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it, and that every survivor has a voice, a story, and a right to be seen and heard. One night, as she stood in the garden under the stars, she felt the soft breeze brushing her face and whispered a prayer for all the women she had yet to meet, the women whose stories were still untold, the women still hiding in darkness. She sent them hope, love, and courage through her words, through her actions, through the home she had built. She promised that every future resident would be met with compassion, understanding, safety, and opportunity. She smiled softly, knowing that the mission was alive, and that she was a vessel chosen to carry it forward. The transitional home had become a symbol of triumph over adversity, a monument to faith in the human spirit, a living sanctuary where courage was nurtured, where scars were honored, and where healing transformed into empowerment. Taweaka had turned pain into purpose, trauma into testimony, survival into sanctuary, and in doing so, she had reshaped not only her life, but the lives of countless others. And as she stood watching the sunrise on the first day after the anniversary celebration, the golden light spilling across the walls, the laughter and quiet voices echoing softly in the distance, she realized that this was the beginning, not the end, that the home would continue to grow, evolve, touch lives, and inspire hope for years to come, that every step of fear and every ounce of faith had led her here, and that the legacy of love, resilience, and courage would never fade. She breathed in deeply, feeling peace, joy, gratitude, and the quiet strength of knowing that she had lived her purpose fully and completely, and that the story of survival and transformation would continue through every woman who stepped into the light. The journey had been long, the nights dark, the trials relentless, but every tear, every fear, every small victory had been necessary to create this moment, a home alive with hope, alive with courage, alive with love. And Taweaka understood in the depth of her soul that true healing is not only about surviving, it is about rebuilding it, is about nurturing it into a life full of possibility, full of joy, full of meaning, and that is exactly what she had done and continues to do.